Muted.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Keith Tanaka with SaltStack, and very excited to be kicking off what we're calling the Best of Salt Conference 16 webinar series. If you didn't join us for this past Salt conference, we hope to see you next year. It's an annual conference held here in Salt Lake City. We had over close to 600 people attend our conference. Amazing conference. A lot of our community members, users were there. We had over 70 talks. And from those 70 talks, we have selected the most popular ones. And we will be going throughout the summer. We'll be going through the best talks from SALT Conference. And this first one, I'm pleased to introduce Christer Edwards of Adobe. He will be focusing on security compliance and security compliance with SaltStack, and be introducing you to a project called Hubblestack. I do want to just go through some housekeeping things. On June 22nd, we'll be having our second Best of Webinar Series talk given by Corey Quinn of Future Advisors, entitled Heresy in the Church of Docker. This was another great conference talk from Salt Conf. This was also given at Scale in LA, or sorry, it was LA this past summer. So we're excited for that one. So please feel free to register for that one as well. For this webinar, everyone is muted, but the chat is functioning. So we're going to be monitoring chat, and as Christer goes through his presentation, feel free to ask questions. Christer's sitting right here, so you can say hi, Christer. Hi. But we'll use the chat function to ask questions throughout the session. And then the recording is, we are recording this session, so for anyone who registered and you weren't able to attend, we're going to be sending this out, and for those on as well, we'll be sending this out later this afternoon. The last thing I want to mention is who this talk is meant for. This talk is for, if you're new to SALT, feel free to stay on the line. But we may be talking about components of SALT that may be new to you, or you may have you may not know of. And if that's the case, if you're new to SALT, check out our docs, docs.saltstack.com. It's a great place to get started. We've recently updated it, and you can see the different, we start with remote execution. If you're looking at the screen, remote execution, then we go into configuration management, cloud control, and event-driven orchestration. But it's very easy to understand the core components of SALT through our docs. If you would like to have a conversation with one of our solution engineers as well, feel free to reach out to the email listed here at sales@saltstack.com. So with that, let me just quickly introduce Christer Edwards. He is a longtime SALT user, one of the first users of SALT actually, and I believe the first to do SALT State, according to Tom Hatch. And Adobe is also a longtime user of SALT. And Christer, for the Utah TechOps group within Adobe, is the SALT master, as we like to call it. There are probably close to 100 people now that leverage SaltStack at Adobe, and Christer has helped get many of those people trained up and serves as the point of contact. But through his experiences with Adobe and his own use cases, he is going to be sharing what he has built on top of SALT. And it's solving a problem or issues that we hear day in and day out with customers that have to do audits either on a quarterly or annual basis. So I think Hubblestack and what Christer will be talking about is solving real world business problems that happen every day in any company environment. So with that, we welcome Christer, and we'll pass it over to you.
All right.
Now this talk is slightly evolved since SaltConf. I hope that's okay. But like you said, today I want to talk about Hubble, what I kind of call compliance for DevOps. This is a project coming out of Adobe TechOps. Good news for everyone listening and everyone that will check out the recording. We have open sourced all of this, so we would love to get your feedback and your contribution. We'd love to have you help test it, make it better. You might be surprised that Adobe is doing open source stuff, but we're trying. We're getting better at it, and this is one of the things we're doing that with. So Hubble is made up of 4 main components that I want to talk about, and I'll go over each of these, and then I'll have a demo at the end where I'll demonstrate a lot of the functionality. We do have a couple of brand new features that I'll be demoing. These are just in very recently. They're still in the develop branch, but I have them in the demonstration. We'd like additional testing on these as well. In any case, let me dive into some of the components of what Hubble does. The first component we call Nova. This is the auditing engine. What Nova does, well, Nova is actually made up of smaller submodules, but Nova will audit your system against a defined baseline benchmark and tell you where it is out of compliance. These benchmarks or these tests can be everything from whitelisted and blacklisted packages on systems to services that you want running or never running, file permissions and ownerships, checking inside config files. We've just with Nova, we've built this kind of simple suite of tests that you can create and customize and audit your system against baseline. Some of the recent additions to Nova that we've received. We recently got a pull request for a SSL validation module. This will let you point to SSL endpoints and be alerted when they're going to expire within the next, defined date range. We got a module for, or we've just recently finished up a rewrite of the CVE scan module. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we can scan systems for published vulnerabilities and known bad or known vulnerable packages. So Nova handles all the auditing. Whatever kind of test you want to run against the system, you can create or customize the existing audit profiles that we've created and create your own customized kind of, this is the profile that we want all of our systems to comply with, and see how far off they are. Again, I'll be demoing some of these Nova pieces here in a little bit, so we'll come back to that. The next piece is called Pulsar. This is the component that we use to do real-time event monitoring specific to file integrity monitoring. So we want to know if people are accessing specific files, or we want to know if people are editing or copying files, or the stuff about, or I guess the example would be, maybe an intruder is on one of your systems and they drop some little Perl script that's, going to do something bad. We can notice that event when it happens and report back information about that file, like who created it, the timestamps, hashes, all that kind of stuff. I unfortunately don't have this to demo today, but it's part of the Hubble project and something that we're actively building out. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but Hubble has a pretty robust reporting system. So when these events happen through Pulsar, it's totally customizable to, or as far as where those events get sent. So you can send them to Slack if you want. You can send them to Splunk or Elasticsearch or whatever. In regards to where these events are sent for notification, that's all very flexible. We have another component called Nebula. Nebula is kind of what allows us to take compliance snapshots. What we've done with Nebula is leveraged another open source tool that Facebook released called osquery. osquery allows you to query your system like it was an SQL database. So you can just send queries to your systems and say, you know, show me where I have open ports bound, you know, under this port range, or show me running processes under this user, show me any of my SUID stuff, you know, just all kinds of different queries that you can send against the system. You can send non-security related queries as well, but what we leverage this for is for security related things. And then we can put these queries in and leverage the SALT scheduling system to run these on a cadence and then get essentially snapshots, you know, every hour, every day, every month, whatever. What did my infrastructure look like right now as far as open ports, running programs, that kind of stuff? So hopefully the idea with Nebula and being able to schedule and run these queries is you can get a sampling of what's going on around your infrastructure really quickly and really regularly, and then report that back and dashboard it somewhere for, you know, for looking at later or reporting to management or whatever it might be. The fourth component of Hubble is called quasar. This is what handles remediation and reporting. Primarily, well, I guess I should back up. The remediation is something that always comes up when we talk about auditing. A lot of people always have the question, well, okay, you told me what's broken, can you also fix it for me? That remediation is planned and expected in Hubble, but it's not yet implemented. We've essentially kind of made room for it in the code, but we haven't put it in yet. I have some reservations about automatically making changes to other people's systems. So we're kind of going slowly on the remediation, make sure we do it the right way, make sure we have the right approach to it. In the meantime, if you're interested in the remediation, I would suggest coming to talk to us, and we'll have some links at the end. But primarily, I would suggest, let's say Hubble finds an issue in your SSH config or something. I would suggest creating template SSH configs and just applying those. Eventually, I think the solution for remediation would be to leverage the SALT state system and use the states that the users have created. That way, it kind of alleviates my fear of just making changes that are unknown and keeps you in the driver's seat as far as what changes are being made. Now, beyond that, the reporting system is very flexible. We make use of all the underlying SALT returners. And what this means is we can send this report data pretty much all over the place. SALT's returner system is pretty robust, and it has a whole list of different modules. So what we can do with this is we can easily say, okay, I just got this data from Pulsar that says this file system event happened. Well, okay, send that to Splunk, and we have a dashboard for that. Or I want to get the file integrity monitoring of alerts in a Slack channel and see them real time. Or I want to send this to our Elasticsearch, or whatever it might be. This simply leverages SALT's returner system, And so SALT's really doing most of the heavy lifting for quasar as far as the reporting goes. But anyway, so with these 4 components, the auditing, file integrity monitoring, snapshotting, and reporting, I think we have a pretty robust solution that's flexible enough for everybody to use. It's designed, just like SaltStack, to be very modular. So we can have Nova modules and build custom modules for doing specific types of audits. You can totally configure the file integrity monitoring as far as what paths on the file system you're looking for, and what frequency you want them to be checked. It's very so again, it's very modular, and it's meant to be it's meant to leverage SALT as much as we can. One of the early design ideas about Hubble was to make it as easy and simple as possible to drop into any SaltStack installation, not have any really additional dependencies, leverage SALT wherever we can, as far as SALT's different abstractions to the operating system, to the different distributions, that kind of thing. So to be able to install Hubble, you just need to drop in a custom execution module, sync it out, and add a directory to your state tree. And that's it. I'll demo a little bit of that here in just a minute. But again, this is made to be very easy to add to any SALT installation, whether it's 100 servers or 1,000 or 10,000. It scales just as well as SALT scales, and again, it's just as easy, we hope, to customize and extend as SALT is. We leverage, or Hubble leverages SALT's targeting system in being able to define what checks you want run against what systems. So we can use custom roles that you've defined, different attributes. Maybe they're through greins, or maybe they're through the pillar system. You can tie into a CMDB and get the data out of that. Regular expressions, lists, node groups, all kinds of ways that you can define different patterns to target your systems. Hubble leverages all of SALT's underlying targeting, so it's very flexible as far as defining what checks are run where. Beyond that, we have different slides. Customizable profiles. What we've done is gone out and collected a number of the different public standards that exist, like the CIS, the Center for Internet Security, or DISA STIG, ISO, NIST, these different published best practices and security standards. We collect all of these and we put them into pre-built benchmark or kind of check profiles. So what you'll see if you install Hubble is you'll see a directory that has a bunch of different YAML files in there, and these YAML files are a representation of these upstream CIS check benchmarks. So what we've done is we've taken the PDF version, or the kind of more human-readable version that CIS publishes, and we've converted that into a YAML syntax that's, if you're familiar with the SALT state system and how states are written, it'll be very similar and very familiar to you. We convert it, it's kind of a midpoint between the human-readable PDF and the machine-readable Python. The hope here is that to customize or to create profiles, you don't have to be very technical. You can have maybe somebody on the security team or from the compliance department help define what these profiles look like. they'll have to have a little bit of technical knowledge, but the hope is that it's accessible by even non-technical people. So we already ship with a bunch of the CIS checks. I think we've had some pull requests for some STIG checks, and but we have a small handful of these that are built in that come with it. We would like to have more. If you'd like to contribute to these, this is a great, easy way for even not super technical people to contribute to an open source project. So if you're interested in that, pay attention to the slides at the end. I'll have some links to where you can contact us and find more information and contribute. So I'll show you an example of what some of these profiles look like as well in the demo here in a minute. I mentioned this briefly earlier. CVE scanning, auditing. We demoed this a couple months ago, I think in May, at a SaltStack meetup, and it was pretty well received. The feedback we had, though, and some of our initial development was limited to just a single distribution. But recently, since that presentation, we've rewritten it, and now it supports, we're happy to announce that it supports most all of the major distributions, everything from Arch, CentOS, Debian, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple. But now what we can do here is we either provide a input file, or the system, if you don't provide an input file, the system will query these different announcement lists, essentially. You know, Debian, for example, will put out an announcement. Hey, we found a vulnerability in package X. Please upgrade to package X.Y. This scans the system and looks for package X. And if you have it, it tells you and notifies you and gives you information about the CVE, URLs to where to find more information, what CVEs apply, what package and package version, and that kind of stuff. And I'll be demoing that here in a minute. This is one of the new features and something we've been focusing on a little bit lately that I'm happy to see some real progress and some new functionality in. So with that, I want to give a little bit of a demo. Let me see here. Can we now all see that, I assume? Okay. So as a quick demo to just install Hubble, I can do a git clone of the Hubblestack repo, and I pull down the directory. I've already done that, so I'm not going to clone it again, but now I have this Hubblestack Nova directory. So I've checked out Hubble and the collection of Nova modules. This has a modules directory, just like Salt has an underscore modules for custom modules. So I can just copy Hubble from there into my Salt state tree. And then I can sync that out everywhere. Oops. Salt util sync modules. So this will sync out the new module everywhere. I already have it everywhere, so it didn't sync anything. But then you also just copy this directory into your Salt state tree, and you're done. So what was that? 4 or 5 commands? Just seconds, minutes to get Hubble tied into Salt and ready to go. So I have a Salt installation here. I have a Debian 8, CentOS 7, and Ubuntu 16.04 machine. They're all responding to me. Sometimes I like to send my ping a couple times, this has been a long, it's not really an issue, but it's like you kind of have to prime the pump sometimes, like get everybody's attention. So I send pings out a couple times and then everybody's ready to go, perform better. I don't know, maybe it's just me. So what I can do now is I can do hubble.sync, and what this will do is sync out all of the profiles and the modules out to each minion. So you see we have some CentOS 6, CIS benchmark, CentOS 7, Debian 8, RHEL 6, RHEL 7, Ubuntu. There's a number of different profiles that are already in here. And then we've got a different suite of different modules. So different modules for firewalls, looking inside of files, finding open ports, packages, services, a number of the things that I mentioned earlier. But this is all bundled in that Hubblestack Nova directory that we copied in, and we can sync it out like that. And then we can try to load these modules and see what modules are compatible with the system. Different platforms will have different module compatibility, some for Windows, some for Linux, some for different distributions, maybe FreeBSD or something. So what this tells us is that for CentOS 7, for example, this is the data that it imported. So we can validate what profiles it has access to and it knows about. We can see that it loaded these modules, and it did not load these modules. They didn't pass different compatibility tests. Some of these make sense. They're for Windows. One of them is for FreeBSD. Another is for Linux, but it requires a specific binary, so it failed for that reason. And we can see that for all of our systems there. Now, if I go here into my state tree and in my Hubblestack Nova directory, there is a file that we can create called top.nova. This is pretty much, this is very much similar to the top file that you would have in Salt's pillar system or in Salt's state tree. It's essentially a mapping of what checks should be run on what systems. So if I open this, right now I'm just saying I want all systems to be checked against the version 2 of the CVE scan module. If I wanted to run certain systems, let's say I want to run anything that starts with CentOS, and I also want to run the CIS CentOS 7 level 1 scored benchmark, or the Debian for the Debian systems, or so on. I can create this map. Like I mentioned earlier, the map leverages Salt's flexible targeting system, so we can use any kind of compound match we want in this targeting. So we can target by greins or pillar or node groups or whatever it might be. So if I add that, and then I run this salt hubble.audits, this will apply that map of checks against the corresponding set of systems and give me a report of their compliance and their security. So this tells me, okay, Debian 8, 99% compliant. It looks like it failed on one test. It has a vulnerable libxml2 package. It applies to all of these CVEs, which makes it sound like kind of a nasty one. And I can go to this URL if I want to know more information about it. For Cent 7, 90% compliant. Looks like it has an installed vulnerable kernel. That's probably not great. Looks like there's a number of issues with that installed kernel. Wow, quite a few. And it says Ubuntu is 100% compliant. Now, one thing that I noticed about this during my testing, I don't know if anybody uses Google Compute Engine, but that's where I'm testing this. And it turns out that Ubuntu, at least in GCE, automatically applies security updates. Because when I tested this morning, Ubuntu was 90% and had 4 vulnerabilities. So that's a thing I learned today, and makes me maybe think about using Ubuntu. I don't know. Anyway, So if you just run hubble.audit without any arguments, it'll apply that map. If you run it with a comma-separated list of arguments, it will just run whatever you provide on the target you provide here in your salt command. If that makes sense. So I'm going to tell everybody, to run CV scan v2. In this case, it should only run that one. Now, again, all of these checks could be put into Salt Scheduler. So you could automatically run these once a day. You could generate your reports, or you could using the reporting system of Hubble, you could send these reports back to a dashboard or to Splunk or wherever, you know. So you can schedule these. It's very flexible as far as where does it go, what is it targeting, what kind of checks we have, and again, I don't have a demo for the file integrity monitoring events right now. I don't have this on or set up on this environment, but it is available inside of the Hubblestack repo. For the file integrity monitoring, actually we're leveraging Salt very much for that. So a lot of it is just actually custom configurations to Salt that achieve file integrity monitoring. So it's not specifically just a module that you'd install, it's configuration that you'd set up. But I won't demo that now. Let's see here. Oops. Let me go back here. So looking forward, some of the things we want to be able to do, or some of the next things that we're going to be working on rather, are expanding out our benchmark coverage. So have all of the CIS benchmarks created for all of the distros. We'd like to have some better or some improved support on the CVE scanner. We want to support every platform. Right now it supports a number of Linux distros, but not yet all of them. It's just a matter of us adding a new feed into the system, but that takes a little time. And mostly we'd like to see a lot more contribution from the community. Tell us what your needs are and make sure that we can accommodate that using Hubble and using SaltStack. This tool is being deployed internally at Adobe and will be our compliance and security auditing tool. And I'm sure over the next couple months and throughout the rest of the year, we'll be getting a lot of feedback and making a lot of additional improvements. Right now, we're not technically we're not in our final state, of course. I would say we're probably in a beta release. We would like to have a formal first public release beginning in July. So keep that in mind. If you do testing with us now, things might still be a little bumpy here and there, but we're trying to polish that all up by the end of the month and have a formal release in July. So if you don't want the occasional bug, you might wait. But if you'd like to get your hands dirty and you'd like to see how this works, we'd love to have you involved and come contribute with us. So beyond that, if you'd like more information, we have this published at a website, hubblestack.io. This website has a link to all the Git repositories, some of the documentation. It has a link to a Slack team where you can join and discuss with us real time what you'd like to see or what bugs you might have found or what feedback you have. We'd love to see as many contributors as we can. I really believe in what open source can bring to a good project, and we'd really like to leverage that here with Hubblestack. I know open source is very important to SaltStack as well.
Sure.
Let's see. With that,
there are a few questions.
There are some questions.
Yep, there are some questions. Maybe we'll start off with. Can you show us what's in the CV scan version 2, the YAML file?
Oh, yes. So now I'll have a disclaimer about this before I show it to you. In order to leverage support for all the different distributions, I found a security feed that aggregates all of these different announcements from the different vendors, and then creates a JSON object that you can query through an API. So we're using a third-party open source, I think it's open source, but it's a third-party community tool for querying for different CVEs and stuff. What we want to do is create our own, or possibly work with SaltStack to create one. But right now, the CV scan YAML just says, here's a URL to go find the data at, and here's a TTL for caching it. So most of the code for this will be actually in the CV scan v2 Python module, which is currently in a develop branch and hasn't been merged. Like I said, this was very, very recent stuff that we're still testing. I guess I forgot to show some of these, but while I'm in here, let me show some of these YAML files. This is kind of along the lines of what do these profiles look like. So these profiles, you can see here, this is defined at the top. This is using the grep blacklist module. So it's looking for specific patterns inside of config files and making sure they are not there. So this is all just human readable text in a YAML format, but the aggregation of the different modules, the grep module, the package module, service module, stat module, and so on, those handle all the checks behind the scenes. Hopefully that answers that question.
Another question, do you plan to add listings for general updates and not just security CV compliance?
We haven't really talked about that too much yet. That's definitely something we can look into. If you'd like to discuss it, feel free to submit an issue on GitHub or join us in Slack and talk to us more about what your use case is.
Okay. All right. So any other, there didn't seem to be any other questions, but I think if you do have specific questions for Christer and about Hubble, the Hubble Slack channel is the best spot for that. I'll just give before we wrap up, just a quick use case, or just feedback from the community thus far. Christer has shared this talk a number of times. We've heard from specific companies who just recently went through audits. Their whole team, half a dozen people on the team, stopping their current day jobs to do this audit. And Christer shared Hubblestack with them. And one of the guys on the team just put his head down and said, "Oh my gosh, you could have saved me 3 weeks of work through Hubble." And we're seeing it across the board. We'll be following up. Again, we invite you to go to the Hubblestack Slack channel. As a SaltStack team as well, we get a lot of these questions. We have been trained, and we have been, obviously we understand what Hubblestack can do with Salt. So we have specific demos that we can do for you guys as well after this. So again, thank you for your time. Christer, thank you for your time as well, joining us today. We appreciate everyone participating in today's webinar. Stay tuned for the next one on June 22nd. And thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, guys.